Good morning, all, or I guess happy lunchtime to my guests and others of you living in the future. And welcome to Kal-bardr's Corner for this episode of Coffee with Cal. I am Baron Kal-bardr Gellir, painting the Meridian Cross, painting the Argent Comet, painting the Pilgrim Star, painting the Palmer's Lantern, Defender of the West, and Reaper. Coming to you live from the southwest outpost of the barony of Southdowns here on the beautiful southern coast of Meridies. Joining me today is a dear friend, the former DEI officer, an amazing human with a delightful personality and fantastic hair to match, Baroness Zahra. Good morning, Your Excellency.
Good morning, Your Excellency. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm caffeinated. I'm awake. It's a bright and shiny day, and it's not raining today, which is freaking good for me, frankly, because I'm tired of the thunder.
Has it been real bad?
We've been in a drought, and then it's like, oh, you've been in a drought. Here's some thunder and rain. Explosions yesterday. So yeah, it's a quiet day. It's nice. Zahra, this is the first time you've been on a show with me, actually. I think we've talked a lot. So can you introduce yourself to the crowd, who you are, where you're from, and why you are in fact amazing?
I can do part of that. It's going to be less jazzy than yours. But I'm Zahra, or Jessica. I am from Chicago, currently in Columbus, Ohio. And I was the first DEI corporate officer for the SCA. So now I am hanging out in retirement.
Which is my first question is how's retirement been? But we'll get to that in a minute. First, this show is, of course, coffee themes. We have to talk about our beans. So I pulled I was feeling very southern today. So I pulled the butter pecan from New England Coffee. It's so tasty. Gotta love it. Put a little sweet cream in it. And I had to break out my Ontario mug. So this is one of my mugs I got from the Queen of Ontario Gulf Forge a couple years ago. But I love it. It's so pretty. It makes me, or no, not Gulf Forge, Ontario West. That's what it was. Yeah. It's so pretty. It makes me happy and it's delightful. How about you, Jessica? What are you drinking over there?
We could have twinned. I got the same mug, same war.
Oh, there you go. I think it was one that oh God, I'm not a Shoxy, Rifkin. There it is. That was one Rifkin gave out to all the visitors, and yeah, you and I both visited that war. So
yeah.
I should have told you. My bad.
This is my mug of delight. Of course, it's a Maggie mug because
I was like, that's a Feed the Ravens mug. Yeah, I could have put my Feed the Ravens mug. We could deal on that.
And this is, I think, just chocolate in my normal coffee because, fun fact, protein drinks and coffee as creamer. Great. Excellent.
There you go. I have trouble finding protein drinks that taste good that are not milk based, and because I can't have the milk.
Oh, okay.
All the plant based proteins are not great.
That would not be a fun start to your morning.
It's like, here, put some dirt in your coffee. I'll pass. It's already don't need it.
Fair.
All right, gang. So for those out there watching, please let us know you're watching. Introduce yourself in the comments, who you are, where you're from, sort of thing. And if you have questions throughout, please drop them out there. Let us know, and we'll address them as we can. On that note, let us do this real quick. Views and opinions expressed here are those of participants and do not reflect any official position or policy of SCA Incorporated. Whereas Jessica is not currently a sitting officer, there will be some things we'll talk about in this that are related to her office that she held. And also some things that we will specifically go, can't talk about that and move on because of that. So we're going to be very honest, but also careful to maintain confidentiality and things. So covering that. So Jessica, Zahra, my dear friend, yes. How's retirement been?
Peaceful and uneventful.
Let's do that. Which
no.
I was like, that's a lie, but okay, cool.
No, it's been can I curse? Is that?
Yeah. Oh, hold on. I'll do it. Yes, now you can curse.
Thank you. It's been a shit show.
Okay. Yeah. So elephant in the room. Like your ending of your office did not go well.
No.
Let's talk about that. What from your side? What did that look like? Why? Let's give me the tea.
Okay. So very, very kind of stripped down. Corporate officer terms are about 3 years. I had a few months with the previous interim officer, Gigi, to kind of get my footing under me. So I was coming up on 3.5 years having done the job. Without kind of talking about what that looked like, it was not good. It was very difficult. It's very hard to introduce something as controversial as DEI to a new population. And it was very difficult to kind of try to incorporate it into the fabric of a corporate structure that's very entrenched, right? So when we were coming up on my end of term, I had kind of had a lot of difficulty trying to get folks to work with me on bringing in the next person. I heard back very little. There was a lot of turnover. It was just very, very complicated. And so when the end of term day came up, I had heard nothing. We passed that day, and about 6 weeks after that, I was very much pushing in a meeting for kind of what are we doing next? I have a plan. I've talked to John. I've talked to my ombudsman. All of us are good. We've got kind of a thing to move forward. Get a new person in. I'll stay on a little extra. And there was very limited conversation. And then right after Thanksgiving, so right before the holidays, I got the sorry, we're not going to extend you. I'm like, it's already 6 weeks past my
like you kind of did, but okay, sure.
And when I asked for the reasoning, it was very inconsistent. And I don't think I've really talked about this too much, but it was basically a mixture of well, we don't think you've done the job we thought you were going to do. And I'm like, you didn't have a job for me. You didn't know what it was.
So no expectations that you also didn't meet. Okay, sure. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
The expectations you didn't have that I didn't meet. And then that kind of segued. And then basically the phrase that I eventually got given was, we wanted a fresh start, which was very much a slap in the face. So I sat on it through the holidays. I didn't want to react in anger. I could not talk about a lot of the specific struggles that I had faced with people interpersonally or in the meetings. I didn't want to violate anything to do with confidentiality. And I didn't want it to come across as this girl is just bitter.
Right.
Well, okay, I really wanted to highlight it.
And let me clarify just okay. So obviously not talking about things from interviews and things like that are DI issues that are private. Absolutely. That makes sense. Did you sign some sort of like NDA sort of thing about bod stuff?
No.
Okay. So you can talk about all the bod things because there's no privacy around that.
I think DEI stuff is aside.
Okay.
I very much kind of buy into the fact that like I agreed to take on certain fiduciary responsibilities, and that includes things that were told to me with the understanding of confidentiality I will keep. Because it's a personal thing. I don't know that there would be legal repercussions, but I do want to be very I kind of have to wake up with myself in the morning.
That's why I asked that. I want to make sure that we're talking about there's no like document you sign versus this is your personal decision. Because if your personal decision to maintain confidentiality, that's perfect. I'm not going to argue that point at all. I'd say I just want to make sure we're clear about where that line is, because I think that's a thing we were talking about a lot with the transparency is where is the line officially? Every person makes
I did not sign an NDA.
Cool. Okay, just checking. Okay, so yeah, that and there's some opinion, by the way. Patrona, this is your face. And there's some opinions out there of this did not go well. I think we can all agree it did not go well. When you did finally respond, right? So you sat on this through the holidays, which I applaud you for doing. I was angry on your behalf. I think a lot of us were. We all wanted to respond negatively on your behalf, and we went, okay, Jessica's just chilling. We'll just chill too, I guess. What was your actual, like, when you finally got around to dealing with this, what was your response?
So within the first 2 weeks I had written up, we'll call it the first draft. And the very first draft had a lot of expletives in it, and that got taken out. And then I had my working draft, which I then sent to several different friends with backgrounds in law, basically going, I need you to make sure that I am not saying anything that could possibly be taken as libel or slander or problem. Am I violating anything that could be confidential?
Like, I can be a dick, but can I be a dick and go to jail? Like, just keep me out of jail at this point.
And not just that, to me, it was very, very important that no matter how I felt, people knew that, like, this is the way they're treating this program. Right? Because of course I was upset. I spent 3.5 years doing something, and it was a lot of tears and a lot of work. I had 50-hour weeks fairly regularly, and it hurt a lot to have the people I had worked with kind of just throw it away and tell me, and to say we wanted a fresh start is to say your work doesn't matter.
Right.
So it was very, very hard, but I didn't want this to be, she's bitter.
Right.
She's angry, because we all know what happens when Black women get angry, right? And I needed to keep my credibility.
Right.
So I sat on it. I read it through. I took out the vast majority of anything that was about my personal emotions. And I gave all that shit to my friends.
Which is what you should do. That's what friends are here for.
Yeah. And then I don't know what I expected. I don't think I expected it to blow up the way it did. But it did. So that circulated. Ironically, several of the people who responded negatively actually kind of were like, oh, she's just causing more issues, and she's saying all of these things. And I did get an enormous amount of backlash. I got death threats. There were
Wow.
There are screenshots of comments talking about how their old rugs would go missing, and don't worry about the blood stains if the old rug goes missing. Like, it was really.
Oh, this is another, like, okay, so yeah, it's another instance of let's rent a backhoe and problems. Okay, yeah. That's not representing anything out there. You see, okay.
It was incredibly problematic.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, it was not delightful. I got a lot of backlash, and despite everything I kind of tried, there were a lot of people that were just like, she's bitter, she's angry. My favorite comment was this essay that I might frame, honestly. Yeah. And it was like, what I hear, and I'm not part of the SCA, but what I hear is that this megalomaniac came in and tried to dominate the board and asked her to be promoted to a board position. It was bananas. And I was like, yeah, tell me more about what I did. This is hot. Never fan fiction written about me.
I sound good on paper, man. Yeah, right.
Like, damn, girl. This is the villain era that I wanted, that I'm never gonna get. So, like,
embrace it while you're the bad guy, right?
It was good. It was great.
That makes me sad. So I didn't know any of that. So, like, that face was genuine shock of, like, I can understand these people going, okay, she's a little bitter. I get it. Like, I can understand that reaction. People who don't know you don't know the situation. I get it. To go as far as death threats in a society built on chivalry and courtesy is disheartening to me. Like, that makes me cry from a very, like, just low place, because that. Okay, I'll deal with that later. Okay, that happened. So, for those wondering why Zahra and I are doing a show about DEI when all of this has been, the first 15 minutes has been this bullshit, I want to talk about the positivity, and that's what I think from you, and think from those who worked with you, is throughout all of that, you have been still a positive force for DEI and the SCA. Whether you think it or not, whether other people think it or not, I've seen it, and those of us have seen it, and I want to thank you for that as publicly as I can, because on top of all of that bullshit, you're still a positive force for us, and thank you for that. So let's talk about what's to do moving forward. I think that's where we have to look at is there are things we can fix in the SCA. All that's a problem. What can you and I do? Right.
Right.
So a new DEI officer was chosen.
Yeah.
You seem very happy with them. I don't know Charles. I know him by reputation alone, but I don't know him personally. You seem very happy. Tell about him, about what you think he can, sort of why he's a good choice. Give me some background.
So I'm going to need to segue a little bit into how DEI works at the corporate level of any business, not just this one. So we're going to get a little bit higher level industries for a little bit here.
Come on.
So DEI work is very, very, very slow, right? It is very nebulous in terms of what issues it's addressing. It's very specific to the kind of business that you're talking about. In something like the SCA, you're going to have a higher than average amount of things like accessibility issues because of the events that we put on, right? We are going to need to be very careful navigating some of the potential pitfalls of white supremacy, because within the modern world, the kind of historical interpretation that we do has been used as a haven for white supremacist groups, right? And so we need to be aware of that and very careful. But what I'm getting at is basically we have very unique challenges. And so conceiving of a plan to address those and then executing that plan without kind of moving too quickly for people to keep up is very, very important. There's an enormous amount of compromise. It is not easy to just come in and be like, this is what I want to do. As I can tell you from experience.
Well, and especially coming on the back of COVID and COVID changing the SCA in a very large way. So you have all that happening, the social media things happening, ESCA thing, all our communications changing a 50-year-old organization in a matter of a few years. And then let's toss DEI on top of that.
Yes.
Like it's a lot of change for a boomer population, right?
No, it was incredibly, no one expected COVID, right? The original plan for DEI had nothing to do with this like very largely ethereal realm based work. And so that pivot also took time, right? That changed my entire plan. Everything I was planning on doing had to shift. So what I'm trying to basically make sure people understand, the change is going to be slow. There's no other way to do it, right? There are going to be missteps. There's no other way to do it. People's expectation that a person can come in and then very quickly make the kind of changes that they're looking for is not coming out of a place of knowledge of how DEI works in any organization, right? It is slow. And on top of that, you need buy-in. You need buy-in from not only the populace, but you need buy-in from the corporate office. And that was something that was my unexpected pitfall, is that I got some pushback, right, from people in the SCA, quite a bit for some people, but nothing more than I expected. But for the most part, I had a lot of support within the organization. I was not expecting the enormous pushback that I found at the corporate level. And when I say corporate, what I mean is primarily the board.
Yeah. Because there's a board of directors and there's a handful of corporate officers.
Yeah. I refer to the entire upper echelon structure as corporate.
Upper echelon is very different for that, I think. Just gonna leave that alone. Go ahead, continue. Sorry.
But yeah, it was not what I expected. I expected these people to be kind of behind me and on my side as I tried to execute not just DEI, but my other focus was transparency, because that was very important to get the kind of buy-in I wanted. To some degree, I got it, right? I pushed for the topical town halls. I pushed for the Q&As regarding COVID stuff. I pushed for as much public stuff as I could. I did a lot of public-facing stuff. I still think I may have done, along with Bridget, who's a joy, I think we may have been the most public people for the time we were around. But anyway, so this is a very long way of saying change is slow. That is to be expected. So Charles is fantastic. He is a dear friend. I adore him. He is a great person for this role. And he does this work in the modern world for a very large scale corporation. So he understands what that change is going to look like. His circumstances are different than mine were, right?
Mm-hmm.
It will always be different to not have to be kind of the first one pioneering an idea. And I think on top of that, I may have created a little bit of an environment for him.
Yeah, that you said he walked into a house on fire, literally. Like you tossed a couple Molotovs on the way out. You didn't do it, but you're blamed for it. But yeah,
I mean, it was important to me that people understood what was happening.
yeah,
It was very clear to me in the way that I was denied a last meeting, in the way that I was removed very quietly. It was very clear to me that there was no intent of taking any kind of accountability.
right.
And that's not what DEI is about. So Charles did get a little bit of a house on fire, but on the bright side, he also got a board that knew what the repercussions of bad behavior looked like.
Right.
So I have an enormous amount of faith in him. I think he's going to do absolutely fantastic. My concern is that people will not give him not just the respect, but the time to do what needs to be done. It's slow. He's not going to be able to do everything at once.
Right.
But he has already taken a lot of the proposals that I pushed for, which I have no ownership over. A lot of the things that I pushed for were best practices in DEI. And
Right.
all I did was bring them to the board in an SCA context, right? But the board was resistant to me in a way that I don't think they will be to him. And there's probably a million reasons for that.
I was like, there's a million reasons, and we'll let people fill in the gap there. Because he has the experience with doing the DEI corporately, right?
Mhm.
Is it? I think that's going to be beneficial to him because he can then present them maybe differently to people who speak corporate. I mean, not that our corporate officers are all corporate people mundanely, because most of them aren't. But at least in this case, he can speak corporate talk to them. I'll just put that on the screen while I'm talking. He can speak corporate talk to them and give them the corporate reasons. That's the benefit of the doubt I think we're going to give, right? We'll let Ducky say the rest down there.
He does have, and this is for Charles. This is not me giving them anything.
Right.
He has the experience to frame things in a way that will connect to people who are unwilling to hear you should do this because it's the right thing.
Right.
Which was maybe my mistake.
Yeah. I think you went at it altruistically and for the good of the people.
I think I also wanted to really highlight, from my perspective, I just really wanted to highlight kind of the who's not at the table with us, right? Who are we lacking? We're a huge organization with a tiny minority population, right? And with a lot of people who feel like they're not heard. And how do we bring those people to the table? And I think just coming at this from a different perspective is useful, right? A two-pronged approach. I think it's good. And Charles has such amazing education and background. Like, he really is fantastic for this role. But it would be a lie to say that I'm not bitter about someone saying the exact same thing I did 2 years later and seeing results. But again, it's a different environment now, and
you said a lot of groundwork.
I mean, right.
Like you sort of bashed the door. He just happened to walk up and give it the final kick on some things. He's lucky. There's a he got some of the groundwork laid, which is cool. Yay, good for him, right? So let's talk about some stuff he's done, right? So he's been in office for a couple months now.
Yeah.
From your visions, what has he done that are beneficial? What are some missteps maybe he's had? So what have you seen that are things you'd like to talk about?
I can't think of any missteps. I think he's done absolutely amazing since he stepped up. He's been very consistent about talking about what he's doing, how he's doing it, what his plans are. I was limited in how much I was allowed to say publicly, and it seems that is not the case for him, which is fantastic.
Right.
He got several things moving. If folks had listened to the bod meeting, he got several things moving that were on the docket for years that did not have movement before. And he got them moving, which is fantastic. And it is exactly what this kind of organization needs. And he's talked very publicly about what he wants to do next, right? He's picking up a couple of deputies, which I think is great because this position is way too big.
Right.
One of the things that I pointed out very quickly, I think in my very first meeting in 2019, was that this needed a society counterpart as well as a corporate office.
Which
people don't understand what that means. There is a difference.
Okay, yeah. Can you explain that? Because I don't even understand that, and I've been looking at some of that, going, I don't get the separation there.
Okay, so it is extremely different. Corporate looks backwards, right? So if the game is forwards and the business is backwards, corporate looks backwards. Corporate works with the bod, right? You're talking about logistics. You're talking about future planning. Game side focuses on things like the events, right? Like, so the how do we execute this? What does it look like on the ground? I was a corporate officer. What that means in a very practical sense is that DEI officers from the kingdoms did not report to me.
Right.
That is a really important thing because I wanted to be able to standardize a curriculum for DEI so that we were all saying the same thing. And I had to do that by reaching out and forming personal relationships and then doing as many check-ins as I could person to person because they didn't send me reports. I had no power over them.
Yeah, there was no actual leadership structure built in to help you with that. Okay.
Right. And that was very hard, right? Because there were things happening in the kingdoms that I didn't know about. People were teaching things that might not have necessarily gone along with the DEI outlook that I was trying to plan from the SCA corporate level.
Right.
So I wanted to split the offices. That is apparently finally happening. So that's cool. Another thing that people need to understand about the bod meeting structure is the public meeting that you see broadcast on Sunday is not the main meeting. There's a planning meeting the day before that goes all day. It's like 8 to 10 hours. And there are topics discussed there. Not the same ones necessarily.
Right.
So keep in mind that you're not seeing the entirety of conversations. You're actually not seeing most of them.
Yeah, when that's that's one thing I was talking to Joe and Ducky about on Friday. I was like, I feel like, you know, like the R&D list, for instance, it's just read through because all the work for that's already been done.
Yes.
They're just reading it into court essentially
yes.
for this. It's you know, the awarding when you award an award in court, it's only getting read in that day. The work has already been done for it.
Yes.
And that's hard for us when we want transparency for things. R&D list maybe not a good example of that, but that's a great example of what's pared down for those meetings. It's theater of a meeting, you know,
more than I'd like it to be.
Yeah,
I think that there are certain topics that are reserved for the public meeting because the discussion would be better had openly. But in that same vein, there are certain topics that aren't because the discussion would not be better had openly.
Yeah.
Which I don't love. A lot of DEI stuff never made it to public eyes. And so that was very difficult, right? Because presenting ideas that you know to be common sense and then getting the kind of pushback that you get from people who don't understand is very hard.
Right. Yeah. It's like, I have the opinion of, well, you know, obviously, again, we talk about like you could make it all public. You could talk about these things, but also, you know, you have the personal thing of confidentiality. And like I can see the balance of that because there's some things we don't want to talk about. I've talked with people who've done investigations. They're like, yeah, some of that stuff should be kept private and needs to be kept quiet. But also, we need to talk about some of it. I think there's a balance we need to maintain. And obviously, the SCA corporate is about protecting SCA and the organization as a whole, whereas the society folks are trying to benefit the game, and that's a hard balance. Like, how do you balance that? Like, how do you as the DEI officer then looking at that, and how does Charles now balance that? What's best for the corporation versus what's best for the people? They should be the same thing, but are they?
I think I'm much less risk averse because I believed, and I still believe, that I'm not saying anything that people don't already know.
Right.
It's not groundbreaking for me to come out and say we need to be concerned about a potential problem in white supremacy, because regardless of what people want to acknowledge at the board level, we have one. And I think most people know that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that it's new or different for me to say this is a potential problem and we need to be careful when we navigate it. But I do think that the kind of risk aversion that we see is the result of not just, lawsuits, which absolutely are around, but also the idea that everyone has an opinion once you put something into the world. Right? And everyone's opinion feels very valid to them, but very few of those opinions are necessarily coming from a place of experience. I have gotten pushback on every DEI thing I've tried to do from some area or another. And to some degree, you kind of expect an account for that, right? But you can't pretend it's not there by refusing to talk about it. And that's where my kind of issues with transparency came in. I would much rather say I am doing A, B, C, and D. I'm doing them because of X, Y, Z. And have people say, I don't like the way she did X, Y, Z. All right, but you know why I did it.
Yeah.
If I just do nothing and they're like, hey, it looks like B and C got done, they don't know the full story. They don't know why I did what I did. I mean, I would rather have them pick apart what I actually did than make up a narrative that fits their ideas of whatever evil I was trying to perpetuate. So that's my fundamental belief in transparency in a nutshell.
Which, yeah, and I think we've talked about that a lot with the, you and I talked before the show about the rapier issue, right? We talked about the same thing. Like, we have to fill in the gaps in various things that happen. We see a thing happen from the board level, whether it's from DEI officer, from the president or whatever. And because we get the thing and not the why, we have to fill in the gaps. And that's, frankly, probably worse than it actually is. Like, we're making up shit that doesn't need to be, like, it's just wrong because we're going off what we got.
Oh, dude, number one rule, control the narrative.
Yeah.
Because absolutely, if someone has to make up your reasoning, it will be, guarantee, as uncharitable as possible.
Yep.
It will be wild. It will be absolutely... I mean, I swear I was half expecting to see, like, she updated Corpora to remove Europe. Probably to kill all those puppies. Like,
just
what?
all of Europe.
Whoa.
You are Cruella de Zahra. That's your new name now.
I love it. That rolls right off the tongue. Right. And is that registerable? You're a herald.
We'll talk. Ermine spots on a badge. We'll work on it. So yeah, you mentioned the white supremacy thing, and I want to talk because, like, this is okay. Being the white guy in the room here, I knew white supremacy was an issue, but apparently didn't know it was as big an issue as it is in the SCA. Like, which is weird. I'm not sure how I missed that. But, like, two different comments here about people, like, person new to the SCA, like, that's the first thing they heard. Why is that our first thing?
So there's two kind of things that I want to highlight here. One is that, much like the word racism, people take these terms and they imagine the worst possible case. When I say white supremacy, I don't mean that there are militant hordes of people in white hoods trotting through all of our SCA events, right? That's not what I mean. What I mean is that we are living in a society based on structures that empower white folks.
Sure.
And those structures need to be very actively dismantled. And when they are not, those structures will still be at work in any space you're in. So, for example, if you think about where the SCA tends to do demos, I've had people come to me and say, hey, we really would like to see more people of color, more diverse groups. And I ask where they're doing their demos. And they say things like German Fest.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, well. But that is a symptom of living in a white supremacist culture. So you see, it's not about, here's the big bad evil, right? it's about the idea that if we don't actively work to change the structure that already benefits one group to the detriment of another, it's still going to be there. Now, also, I touched on it earlier, but there's a lot of actual evil white supremacist groups that use historical recreation as kind of a base, and they imagine history as this white utopia when it wasn't, right? No. It just wasn't. It's very funny to me, and what it is quite honestly, cultural appropriation, which is funny because a lot of people think of that word as very very specific to one thing, and some people kind of like hand wave it away. But
it's generally very, very colored focused. It's either
it is
Chinese or Asian, whatever. It's very colored focused.
But when people take Norse culture and they say this was a white utopia, I'm like, that is a lie. That is a lie. These were people that traveled all over. There's evidence of people being incorporated into their society from all over the world. Racism, the way we think of it today, which is very heavily anti-Black, did not exist until after chattel slavery, right? This was a result of the European Enlightenment, which is all post-period. So when you're within SCA time period, the way we think of racism did not exist.
Right.
The Norse were not colorist. And so like when we see groups take this and they say, this amazing white utopia of people, I'm like, that didn't exist. They are appropriating your culture and turning it into something it's not. So that's where a lot of the white supremacy talk within the SCA comes from. Right. We want to avoid creating a safe space for people who think that way. And at the same time, we want to address the structures in the SCA that work to make people of color uncomfortable.
Right. Okay. That. So I think that and there's some comments I'm even addressing. Actually, that's funny. Thank you, Raven, for that.
I love it.
Hold on. I was at an event in Sonoma a few weeks ago and heard someone say the SCA in Trimaris has been taken over by the KKK. So I know people had to leave the SCA. All right. That's hilarious to me. Probably not wrong. I mean, clearly not wrong. John B. have said this, so something she's heard. And that's in California, the literal opposite side of the world from, or at least the opposite side of the U.S. from Trimaris. So that makes me all right. So, okay. The topic for today was DEI is ongoing. This is a constant problem. This is the thing we're fixing, and I'd like to think it's gotten better in the last 5 years.
I would like to think that too.
Okay, cool. Has it actually improved?
So I think what we've done in a lot of ways is we have shed light, right? Okay. I think we're having conversations now that we would not have had 5 years ago. Okay. I have had very positive interactions with people who were very blunt about how they felt like what I did or what I was supposed to do as a DEI officer was bullshit until they talked to me or until they took a class or until they learned more about it. Right. And I count every single one of those conversations as a win. Every single one. I think that we have gotten to a point where we can actually talk about these issues with some degree of vocabulary that's accurate instead of just pretending they don't exist, waving them away. And I especially think that with regard to kind of, I would say the more apparent issues of DEI, right? When we talk about things like white supremacy, low minority populations, problematic language, all of that. I do think I'm seeing kingdoms start to really address that, right? We are looking at it and we are saying, what can we do now? We're nowhere near there. We'll never be there. There's never a point where you get your trophy of DEI and you put it on your mantle and you're like, I'm done.
We've achieved. We're done. Well, that's what I think ongoing is important. So, okay. So it sounds to me that the visibility and vocabulary are the first two sort of points.
Oh, yeah.
We're seeing the problem and we're getting words to talk about it. So again, we're having these conversations. This conversation is great. Again, we're having these conversations now so we can start to address the problems. When we fail, right? when we fail, because we failed a dozen times a day in this walk to bettering things. I guess my thought when I've looked at it, I'm like, you did a thing. I'm going to talk about the DEI shirt recently, right? That Charles put out. Have you seen the DEI shirt?
I have.
Okay, so that went out, and I was like, cool, that's an awesome thing. And then I saw the explosions around it, and people claiming that the white sword's bigger and graphical terms, and I went, well, fuck, they tried. At least, like, it's an effort. So they made an effort to do a thing. It may not be done correctly. At least the effort's there, right? So we're making efforts to find solutions. How do we not be angry about that? How do we be okay? Cool. Thanks for the effort. Let's work better and not be angry. Like, where's that? How do we find that?
So, one of the biggest things that I encourage people to keep in mind is that if there was an easy answer, we would have it already. So when people start kind of looking at efforts and getting hypercritical, I always suggest, hey, have you helped? Right. Have you reached out? Have you offered your particular perspective and expertise to this situation? Because there's no way one person would have all of it. I certainly had missteps while I was in office, and a lot of the things that were brought up to me by people who occupied intersections of privilege or not that I just wasn't aware of, right? There were things I didn't know. There were things I couldn't know. You're not going to have the perfect individual who has all of the background of every marginalized group to bring to bear. It has to be a collaborative effort. Right. And we cannot look at people's steps in the right direction and say, you should have been leaping. All we can do is help pull them forward. Now, that said, sometimes missteps are impossible to overlook, right? It is impossible. We have to talk about the impact versus the intent. But at the same time, to ignore that intent is there is to discourage people from future efforts to do better. Right?
Impact versus intent. I like that as an approach. And I think if I can hit it on the head too, was this a genuine effort that fell short, or was it a token gesture meant to be dismissive? What was the impact versus what was the intent? I think that's really, really well said. And as Joe said, sometimes a red star is just a red star. You're right. That's a funny reference from Joe there. So I think in this case, so you sort of get as a reference here, I think, and John talks about is there was no communication around the why. Again, we talked about the why. So we saw the how, we saw the what, but not necessarily the why.
Yep.
And then when it didn't go well, it wasn't handled well. So I think that's, again, the impact of it was not great. And we heard none of the intent.
Yeah.
So we're having to guess. Like, we can look at it and go, okay, I see what your intent could have been. But again, we're making guesses.
Well, we're back to transparency, right? We're back to the idea of everything I did, I tried to go, I'm doing ABC because of X, Y, Z. So even if I was wrong, and I was, people could go, well, this is what you were wrong about. Here's where your reasoning fell through. Right. Instead of going, they didn't have any reasoning. Did this, they don't care. I think it's dangerous when we move without telling people what we're doing, right? You have to give people the opportunity to participate in the discussion. It's the fundamental basis of DEI, right? Inclusivity. Right. And so making sure that people understand why you're doing the things that you do will also afford you a measure of grace when you misstep, because you will. Now, that said, I think that, as politely as I can say, the SCA is in a pickle. There is no confidence. There is no trust.
Right.
I have long thought that at this point, people could start to be transparent and it would just end poorly. Which is not to say that they shouldn't start there, because it's going poorly already. But there is no trust from the populace. And so when people come forward and they say, this is my reasoning, I think it's very likely that people are going to say, well, that's garbage reasoning.
Right.
So I don't know. It's hard to say now exactly what the answers are for this particular set of the SCA kind of in charge, because transparency a few years might have solved a lot of this.
Yeah. And it's almost, it's going to be too little too late at this point, I think, to correct some of that without overcorrecting some of that. And I think that's a balance too.
No, I think so, but there's no other option, right?
Right. Okay, so let's look at the other side. You and I, as populous members in the SCA, and there are way more of us than there are of the bottom society in corporate officers, right? The upper echelon, so to speak. What can we do? What can I do as an ally? What can we do as people sitting here on the ground to support our local folks, support the DEI officers at kingdom levels? Like, what can we do to improve the situation?
So there's an enormous amount of people doing grassroots work, people working at the local level, the kingdom level even. A lot of people coming from a place of personal experience, place of knowledge, and their voices need elevation, right? It is not useful to constantly kind of percolate with whatever the SCA outrage of the week is without then elevating the voices of people who are in a position to say, and here's what we can do better.
Right.
And I would very much like to see those people empowered and given the platform to kind of make change. I also think that there's a lot that people don't realize falls under the umbrella of DEI work. I've done classes on inclusivity for events. And when I tell people, hey, what DEI initiatives are you enacting at your local events? They kind of are like, oh, we don't have the money, we don't have the resources. I'm like, for a large print site program, to make sure that the fonts on your website are readable and to make sure that you have alt text for e-reader, like these are all things that are free. Right. Reserving the first row of court for people who need to be close enough to hear or see, right? Like these are all free. There's a lot of work that we could be doing that costs nothing to implement, and it just takes a level of awareness and analysis, right?
Is it people see it as an all or nothing? They have to do all the big thing, make this big giant change. Just doing one change isn't enough. Is that the issue? Is that sort of
I think
one of the issues?
Some of it.
Yeah.
I think that's some of it. I think people are overwhelmed by the scope of what they perceive to be necessary, and they don't realize that little things matter. I think people are afraid of pushback, the way we talked about, right? You try to do something and everyone kind of jumps on you for it. But at the same time, approaching it the correct way, I'm doing this because of this. What is your feedback? What can I do better next time? I find that helps, right? Avoiding the assumption that you know everything, avoiding the assumption that your way is the best way, right? These are all things that we can utilize to kind of do these little grassroots changes. And like I said, that platform thing is huge. People do not understand how quickly the voices of the marginalized are swallowed by the din of the majority. Right. They don't get it. I mean, when I talk about, and we talked about this right before the show, when I talk about kind of the rapier uproar and I sound almost derisive, it's not because I am derisive of the situation. It's that I am frustrated that 4 months ago, I pointed out that the DEI program was effectively under attack. And that has faded into, kind of the background. And it's not that it's gone, it's that I don't remember people coming forth with huge petitions to restructure. I don't remember lawyers getting involved to say, oh my gosh, this is a huge danger. I don't remember any of that.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I know exactly why, but it didn't happen then. And it is happening now. So yeah, I think one of the big issues that DEI faces is just it has a perception that it benefits a relatively small amount of the population. It benefits everybody. It is for everybody. It is important to everybody, even if they don't see that or understand it.
Yeah. Yeah, and Ducky made a point here. I think you're right. The the rapier situation became the straw on the camel's back, I think. But unfortunately, it does look like, oh, well, okay, it's a white dude being inconvenienced now. Now we're mad about it. Visibility, like I see that. Like I went, because when that first started, I was like, damn it, why are we mad about this thing and not something else? Like, let's be mad about this thing. Like, look at this vacuum.
Sure.
Yes, we should be mad about that thing. But damn it, why are we mad about that thing? There's so much other we could be mad about right now. I have a show coming up, we'll promote in a second, about this topic. But it's like, I want to go yay, because let's fucking fix the problem now. Because that same problem they're addressing is what caused your problem, right? Or part of what caused your problem is the structure's bad, the system is broken, right? I'm glad it's happening. I hate how it happened, I guess. And that's, how do you be both mad and happy at the same time?
I'm not sure people are going to necessarily understand where the issues are necessarily. Like, I guess I'm reluctant to really get excited about, like, oh, there's uproar, because to me the uproar is not pointed at the right direction.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like people understand where the breakdowns in the system are. But that is a much larger conversation than we have time for. And yeah, Ducky and Joe are amazing. They do amazing things. They are two of the people who I have in mind when I say we should be giving a platform to these voices. I did not hear from Zelda or David, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I pointed out that the request.
I reached out to both of them and tried to get them on shows with me, and clearly I've gotten Joe and Ducky on shows. That's been easy. They like talking. But yeah, Zelda and David didn't want to talk, so like I'm a very open platform. If you want a spot here, come have it.
Sure, that is the right. I get very, when people talk about incorporating DEI issues, I tend to think, what experts have you brought in?
Right.
Who has the background to identify where your DEI issue is? There's a lot of disrespect for the field as far as assuming anyone can do it, or anyone with lived experience can do it. And I'm like, this is a field that takes training and study. This is a valid field, and you need experience. And it is kind of crazy to me that everyone thinks that they're DEI experts enough to talk about it. But
and honestly, and that's a really a good example of of one of the problems I see in the SCA overall is people who are doing jobs, whether DEI, whether they're investigations, whether they're seneschals or exchequers, are not trained properly for the job they're doing.
Yeah.
And we can deal with those. And I think those are not one problem. Those are 4 separate problems, or 17 separate problems. We need to make sure we're training people for jobs. So in this case, people who are running DEI initiatives need to be seeking out DEI trainings so that they're not in their own bubble, because you're right. Even you as a lived person only have this much visibility into the problems of the world.
Well, and that's part of DEI training, right? Like, I have multiple DEI certifications and I've worked with it at my job. And every time I'm like, oh, I didn't realize. Like, it really is learning how to incorporate people's perspectives beyond your own.
Right.
But I will point out, Charles does have that training. Charles has had that training and also helped to create that training. He is a very good person for this job.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna do some show plugs, then I'm gonna do some final thoughts. I have some final thoughts, because I think, and I know you have a show coming up too. We'll talk about that'll be a segue to this too. So coming up next on Kal-bardr's Corner, this Friday, I'll be once again joined by Joe and Ducky to continue our conversation from last Friday about the first quarter SCA BOD meeting. This will be episode 2. We're going to cover the committee reports and the Q&A, and then some of the what's happened since then, because this last week has been very busy with things coming out of the SCA BOD meeting. So we'll talk about some of that. We ran an hour and a half, and there was still way more shit to talk about, which is not surprising when you put Joe and Ducky on the screen. So tune in there for next Friday at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then let's see. Road to Retention. Nope, wrong button. There it is. Road to Retention on 5/7. Remote will be back with Brialthan Brains. Sir Bree is amazing. Has some great thoughts on how to change how we train and change how we keep people excited about the SCA, which I think is important in this conversation. And then for the next episode of Coffee with Cal, I'll be back by myself this time. I'm ranting. I'm talking about hypocrisy and lack of action. We hit on it a little bit in this show, and I'm mad about some things. I want to talk about sort of the hypocrisy in the SCA and how we are seeing certain rules applied and not others, and how it's being not equitably handled. So tune in for that. Have some questions, have some comments. There's a full write-up or a little bit of write-up on there, a blurb about it. So bring your coffee, come have a chat with me. I'm going to rant for a little bit. I'll probably be doing that from an event. So that'll be a fun on-site one, which is why I'm by myself, because it's an on-site one. So I may be on my phone. We'll see what happens. If you want to support Kal-bardr's Corner, Coach's Corner, Ask Nights Live, and all the other things we support here on KK Productions, look us up on Patreon, patreon.com/KK Productions, and join our grand wall of patrons. You also can look us up on Redbubble as long as we're there. Search KK Productions, buy a sticker, buy a sheet, buy some awesome stuff out there. When we change from Redbubble, which we probably will in the near future, I will post out what's happening with the merch from that. So check that out. Zahra, you have a show coming up too, right?
I do. I'm apparently doing all the shows this week.
Apparently, you're busy. So tell us about it.
All right. So Tuesday night, we are going to be on Voices of Color with Charles, who is amazing. I've been singing his praises this entire time. I wish I could just shower him in rose petals every time I see him. He is great. He is great.
He'd probably enjoy that. Just have somebody just showering rose petals in front of him the entire time.
He would. It would absolutely, like, the theatrical. I love it for him. I love it. And so we are going to probably talk about his plans, where he's going, what he's doing, how you can help him. So I think that will be fantastic. And yeah, these are the first couple shows I'm doing in quite a while. So I'm getting back into the swing of
being around. It's fun. So you and I scheduled this show I don't know, a month or so ago when so something exploded. I reached out to you. I was like, hey, you got an opinion? You're like, I have an opinion, but maybe not about that. And I was like, cool, let's talk about something else. So, and then you ended up scheduling the show on Voices of Color right after. I was like, that's a perfect timing for this. So I love how it just like organically happened there. So I enjoy when things connect like that. And also Joe loves you. So okay, let's do some final thoughts here. So I think so. For me, DEI is DEIB, which we didn't even talk about the B thing that Charles got to put in there. I liked it. I saw that was sort of a neat concept, and Joe talked about it a little bit, and Ducky talked about it a little bit on Friday, because I didn't even know what the hell it was when I first saw it. But I think the concept is great, and I think the ongoing idea of excuse me, of being supportive. I think there's so much we can't do at a corporate level, right? I cannot affect change there by myself. Right? We can collectively sign the petitions and grab the guillotines and go storm the castle, right? But I can't change that tomorrow. What I can do is be on the boots on the ground at the events, fixing those problems. So one of the things I heard you say that I'm taking to heart is let's find the little things we can do. So the front row, the toiletries in the bathroom, the whatever, find those things we can fix at events when you're planning those events, and let's fix those problems, because that's what we can do.
Yes.
Let's also keep fighting the big fights, but let's fix the little problems too.
Yes.
That's my thought, right? What are your final thoughts on supporting DEI and sort of the ongoing efforts?
Make sure you're bringing a platform to people who know what they're talking about. Make sure you are getting multiple community sourced opinions and not just kind of going in with the I know best mentality. Give grace to people who are doing work, hold them accountable, but give them grace and do what you can to support them and not just kind of tear down efforts, right? I think those would be my little sound bites. And I do want to make it clear, I no longer am a corporate officer. I will probably never be a corporate officer again. But I am still very active in doing this kind of work, and I am still very happy to help. So people can feel free to reach out to me. I still consider this my role in the SCA. Mm-hmm. Like, this is still the work that I am passionate about, and I am happy to help, happy to give feedback, happy to participate. I'm still here and kicking.
There you go. And like I said, and that's why I thanked you for your positivity, even though you've been colossally shit on. We appreciate you for being awesome.
It was a lot.
Zahra, you're a delight. I want you to understand this. We love you. People love you. The populace loves you. There are new people who now love you out there because they've seen you on the show. So there you go. That, folks, is an empty cup. And we've had some opinions here today, and I'm happy to have you. You know, you are welcome back here whenever. The platform is yours if you want it. I'd love to have talks with you in the future. If you have another thing you want to rant about, you're always welcome here.
Always down. Always down. It was a delight.
For those of you out there watching, please tune in next week and every other week. We'd love to have you. Keep out there commenting. Keep supporting DEI. But for now, this has been Zahra and Kal in Kal-bardr's Corner. Have a good day, everybody.